Welcome to Take a Wonder with Shebs. My guest at this point is journalist and author of the new book, Shape of a Boy, Kate Wickers. Kate, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. Where in the world are you currently?
Thank you very much for inviting me on, Shebs. I'm actually in a very, very rainy, stormy Windsor in the UK.
We're going to be talking about your book, Shape of a Boy, and it's a fabulous book. Before we do so, I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself before you got into becoming an author and how you actually first fell in love with travel and what your ambition was when you were growing up.
I always wrote stories when I was little. I was one of those kids who was always writing creatively. And I'd often turn them into little plays to perform to my family, and they'd have to sit there and, humour me. And entering little competitions at the local library and things like that. But I didn't, and I was very good at English at school. That was my standout subject. But I didn't really consider a career in journalism. I went to a very large comprehensive school, and I didn't feel that career choices for girls back then were particularly aspirational. My first degree was a degree in early years education, which I dropped out of.
Okay.
And I decided that teaching really wasn't for me during that time. And it was stressful. I didn't really want to be a, university dropout, but I just knew it wasn't really for me. And I had a couple of other jobs. I worked for the charity Children in Need as a project manager and fundraiser.
Oh, fabulous.
Working on a very large council estate just outside of Brighton, setting up projects for kids, which I loved. And I started doing some more writing around then. I published a little community newsletter with some of the older kids. And I kind of reminded myself that actually that's what I enjoyed to do. And I went back to university then to do a degree in media and communications.
Okay.
And I chose that over journalism because I still wasn't sure what kind of writing I wanted to do. And I knew that it would give me a chance to try out some different things. I did some writing for advertising and, obviously journalism. And I also studied some international relation courses alongside that. But what happened and how I fell into travel writing was that I had a very, very influential professor, a real whirlwind of an American lady, who told me that I shouldn't wait until I'd graduated, that my writing was good enough to, approach some publications now. And she'd said to me, just write about something you love, Kate. Think about something that you can really, write some beautiful descriptions because you do that well, and just start sending your stuff away. So by the time I'd graduated, I was writing regularly for the Sunday Telegraph. Another very inspirational lady who gave me my first break then was Maggie O'Sullivan, who was the commissioning editor at the Telegraph then. And she commissioned a lot from me. And I never looked back, really.
Just on that, actually. So whilst you're in university, getting someone like that as a contact, how did that happen? Did you go out and network, or was it just word of mouth? Or?
I mean, I'm not a great big networker now, Shebs. I'm trying to be a bit more like that because of the book. But I sent my stories off on spec, so I'd write a story. So I wouldn't even pitch. I wouldn't even write a pitch back then. I was so. I felt that I had nothing behind me. I had no credentials. I had no portfolio to show. So, but I was doing some interesting traveling. So, I was doing a lot of backpacking, going to some interesting places. So it wasn't like I didn't have material to write about. I was writing about things like Tet in Vietnam. I mean, this was at a time when Vietnam was just opening up to tourism. 30 odd years ago, no one was really going there. You even had to get a permit to travel from town to town at that time.
Oh.
Every government run. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, fantastic. And of course, people wanted stories about Vietnam because, not that many people were going. So Vietnam War had been over for quite a while, but, you still had that, and you still do today, that, South and North divide, the two places, they're still different today. I've been back a couple of times, but back then there was even more still divide. And I took the Reunification Express from Saigon and travelled north, which I believe is still running. It was a real experience back then. So anyway, I had a lot of very interesting material. So I wrote whole features on spec and just sent them in the hope that someone would read them. And, someone did, Maggie did. And, once I'd had a few features, and big features, I remember the first time I saw one of my features with, big photographs, main feature, it was just such an incredible moment for me as a fledgling journalist. A real pinch me moment. I'll never forget that. And I carried on then covering for quite a while afterwards, adventure travel. So I was doing things like trekking Tiger Leaping Gorge in China, walking the Inca Trail in Peru. And another very sort of landmark moment for me was when I heard that the Rough Guides were publishing a special edition called Women Travel. They were asking for women writers to submit whole stories on different destinations, and I sent in a story on walking the Inca Trail with the group of people that I'd been with to them, and they gave me the Peru chapter. I didn't look back after that. I thought, gosh, this is really what I want to do. This is amazing. And there were quite a lot of the other thing that was inspirational for me as a young woman in her 20s. There were a lot of women that I was meeting who were involved with travel writing. So, it felt great. It felt like a good fit.
You were going to like Vietnam, for example, a place where not many people growing up in the UK would have that in their mindset. And I've been to Vietnam myself actually a couple of times, and it's a fabulous country. Why was it initially that you wanted to go to a place like that rather than go to spots, let's just say, in Europe where it's very popular and the popular destinations? What was your interest in a place like Vietnam?
Well, I think I wanted to go to somewhere where no one else had been. That was, definitely, I thought about it and I thought, where can I go that's really different? And of course, by then I was, doing my degree, and, I was looking for interesting things to write about. At that time, I still wasn't sure, what kind of journalism I might end up doing, but I never looked back after that trip. I think this really felt like what I wanted to do. I wanted to explore places where people hadn't been before. It's difficult to find those places. Even now, this time on, I can only really say that I feel that I was one of the first into Vietnam. I don't think there's anywhere else I've been where I can say that.
What's interesting about your career, I've been reading into it, is the longevity. So what do you think has been the key to that longevity?
Well, there was a huge, quite a long period where I was essentially a stay-at-home mum. And I cover quite a lot of that in my next book, actually. I never gave up writing completely. So when I had, my first child and then, subsequently two more, they always went to nursery 3 afternoons a week. And that's when I wrote. And I also wrote in the evenings. And I had some very supportive editors who I'd written for quite a few years by then, who found me things to write about that wouldn't take me away from the boys. So, it could have been something, it wasn't that interesting, a lot of it, but it was good of them to do it. So it could have been a roundup feature, I remember writing something along the lines of the best new travel accessories to take with you this summer. I read a few sort of pieces on kit and, roundup, family travel pieces, but I pretty soon started traveling with the boys as well. And we'd save anything long haul for things we could do as a family. I would do the occasional short haul trip by myself. But I just kept it ticking over.
Yeah.
I never completely gave up my writing.
That's the key to it. So evolving as time goes on, and you didn't actually stay still, even though you were a parent and you were a stay-at-home mom, as you just said there. You kept ticking along, and having editors who were quite supportive in that in that sense was good because you kept your writing going.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is, you know, while the boys were very young, and obviously I was pregnant, and Neil was traveling a lot as well. He's in a very different field to me, but he was traveling a lot at the time as well. So one of us had to stay at home, and just practically Neil earned more than me. So it was always going to be me. And actually that would have been my choice anyway. So no judgment whatsoever on any woman who, you know, whatever decision they make, you do what makes you happy and you do what works for you, you know, and you do what you have to do for your kids as well. You know, working mums do that as well, to have the opportunity to be at home with the boys. And I took that. I wanted that. I didn't want to miss bits of their early years.
So we'll come on to your book, and the book, as I said, is called Shape of a Boy. I would say I worded it as the epitome of a book about how families can travel to destinations that don't involve hanging around a pool all day. And that's what I got from it, really. You go on various adventures where you think, would you take your family there? I remember there was a chapter in there where you were telling your dad, oh, I'm coming to Borneo. And he was like, where's that? Why are you going there? Is it safe? Why are you taking the kids to these places and stuff? Why did you feel as though it was important to write a book like this? And are you trying to give hope to families, young families, to say, it can be done. If I can do it, you can do it as well?
I suppose so. One of the nicest things since having the book published is the messages I've had from young mums with young kids who have said, oh, wow, I've just read your book and I've absolutely loved it, because I travelled a lot before and I just didn't think I would now I've got kids. So I've read your book, and actually we're talking now about going to Thailand, or we're talking now about going to Egypt, or, you know, one of the other places. And I suppose I didn't set out to be inspirational, is what I'm saying. And I didn't set out to be a parenting expert by any means. I think, you know, it's a real warts and all account of who we are as a family and how we travel together, you know, including all the mistakes I've made along the way as a mother. Very honest in how I write. I mean, The Independent described me as self-deprecating, and actually that's the biggest compliment I think I've had. I don't, you know, I'm not setting myself up as like knowing it all, because I don't. And I think that's what people relate to as well. You know, I've had other mums who have, you know, messaged me and said, oh, I totally get your parenting style. I don't think I've got a parenting style, but you know what I mean. They identify to sort of getting it wrong, learning by your mistakes, and, you know, and things happen by chance. You know, I can't take the credit for all the amazing life lessons the boys have had through our travel. You know, lots of those have happened very haphazardly, but I suppose I can take the credit for being brave enough to take them to those places and letting those things happen.
Josh, Ben and Freddie, they're your kids, and they're talked about throughout the book, and you've got your husband as well, Neil. And actually, before we come on to your kids, you met your husband before you started your career, is that correct?
Yeah, so I met Neil just before I went back to study journalism, and we travelled a little bit together beforehand. You know, very early on, I think one of our first holidays was to Morocco, when again no one was really going to Morocco. So I think we were going. It was obvious we were going to share that love of travel. That, you know, we're very different people. That travel is something that's certainly been a constant in our relationship. And, you know, we've backpacked together, and we've had lots of adventures before having children. So yes, I met him just before I studied to be a journalist.
One of my first guests that I had on my podcast was a couple of years ago now, where it was a family from New Zealand, and they are traveling the world right now as we speak. And they're teaching their kids they're homeschooling their kids, I should say. And so I asked them, how is it possible? Because one of the things actually I noticed was you were traveling with your kids, but it was over a period of time. So it would be, let's just say, 1 year, and then it would be a couple of years later. So it wasn't necessarily all at once, constantly.
I never took them out of school.
You can do it the way my first guest, where you on the road, teach them, homeschool them, go around the world, or you could do it the way you did it, where you've done it, where you keep them in school, get the education and you could travel during the school holidays.
It wouldn't have fitted in with Neil's job to have taken, extended period of time and travelled with the boys. There was a period where Neil was between jobs and we went away for 3 months. But again, it was just before both Josh and Ben had started school. For me, that was never something I considered. I felt it was important that the boys were in school because of the social aspect that school gives them, not just, the kind of reading and writing and, maths, but the social element I felt was important for them. Although that said, I do follow some people who are travelling and doing an amazing job at homeschooling, and the experiences their children are having are incredible. So, but it was never an option for us.
There's nothing wrong with having a home base. You could do, as I said to you, what my first guest, Mike and Sharon, are doing, where you don't have a base and you're just on the road, and they feel as though their kids aren't missing out. In fact, I managed to speak to some of their kids, and very, very social. So there's ways of doing it.
I'd save a big long haul trip to be able to do as a family. And the other thing I do is I've never written just one feature when I go somewhere. I always get more than one commission. If I'm going to go somewhere for an extended period, then I want to be writing a lot. So that's always worked really well.
One of the things about the book, by the way, is that it's a feel-good factor as well. So I read it within a couple of hours, and I couldn't put it down because there was a really good vibe to it, and I just wanted to know about the story of your kids and how you got on. And there's been some moments, because one of your son has a peanut allergy, and it was interesting because you were telling the restaurant or the owners in the restaurant that he's got a peanut allergy, and they would say that, well, this has got so and so as well. Oh, no, that's actually peanut as well. So
it's in Morocco, and they, of course, in lots of cultures, they can't really get their head around the fact that somebody could have an allergy to nuts because, they have nuts so much in their cuisine. And so that was quite hard work. He ended up having bread and ice cream, I think. I was very careful. I got in touch with usually an embassy, and I would get somebody at the embassy to write very clearly, my son has a life-threatening allergy to peanuts and peanut oil, in whatever the language, the destination language was. So, in Thai or Malay. And I would take this with me and show it to.
Okay.
Always in their own language. I'd never try and explain in English. And it's interesting, so we have travelled, widely in Asia, and Josh has never had a reaction. He's never had a reaction until recently in Exeter.
Oh, okay.
The first time since he was 3, and he's now just turned 22, he had a reaction to peanuts and ended up in A&E. It was a good reminder for him. He's just about to go travelling, and I felt like it was a timely reminder for him that, he needs to take his allergy seriously because he'd never experienced having a reaction before. But we were always very careful, and I never wanted the fact that Josh had this allergy to feel that it would, for him to feel growing up, that it would hold him back in any way. I wanted him to be able to explore the world and its glorious food, and not be constantly stressed and worried. And I think if you're careful and you carry your EpiPen, of course, you can lead, a normal life. I kind of think, you never know what's going to happen traveling. You can't go anticipating every little thing that's going to happen to you. I talk about this in the Borneo chapter. So Freddie was 2, Ben was 5, and Josh was 7. And the night before we flew to Borneo, I didn't sleep. I was so worried. I was thinking, what on earth are we doing taking 3 such young children to Borneo? And, I was worrying about, boat disasters, all sorts of things.
Initially, you told your dad it's fine, and your dad said, no, it's not going to be fine. I remember you saying, oh, maybe I should worry.
Yeah, absolutely. I suddenly thought, oh, gosh, maybe my dad's right. What are we doing? And of all the sort of, kids stealing, boat sinking disasters that I'd envisaged, the few days before going, we were staying in a hotel in Kuala Lumpur for the first evening, and there was a little pool on the rooftop. And Ben got into the pool and stood on an earring stud that pierced the sole of his foot. Very painful, actually. Now, that was something that had never, I hadn't gone there. I hadn't gone there with that, accidents. So, I mean, what I'm meaning is really, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the things that you worry about often don't happen. And it's other little things like that you never could have imagined that do. And if you worry about everything, you're just going to spoil the trip. I think go with an open mind, do your research and be safe, of course, but don't let it stop you, exploring. You can't keep your kids in cotton wool. I mean, my boys have had worse accidents here in Windsor skate park than they have, anywhere abroad. So
the experiences that they've had from their travels, would you say it's molded them to the way they are now? And if that travel experience wasn't there, do you feel as though they'd be different people?
Well, I don't know if they'd be different people, of course, but I do feel very strongly, and this comes to the name of my book, Shape of a Boy. I feel really strongly that every experience they've had while traveling, or just at home, has shaped them into the people they are today. I do think, and I do hope that, being in other cultures and meeting different people and the experiences they've had, while traveling particularly, of course, that will have shaped them. There's lots of people said to us, why are you taking your children? They're so young. Why on earth would you go to Mexico or Borneo or Thailand? And, they won't remember it. What's the point? And that's ridiculous, because you wouldn't do anything with your kids, would you? Attitude. And, so that's where the name comes from. I really believe that everything they've experienced has made them into the young adults they are today.
I actually give you an example of myself. So I was taken so my parents are from Bangladesh, and I grew up here, born and raised here, but they took me to Bangladesh at the age of 6. But I remember that very fondly, and that was partly one of the reasons why I wanted to travel more. So because of that experience, and we traveled around a lot in the country to experience what my parents had, where they grew up, the culture, etc. That got me interested at that young age. So you're never too young, I would say,
absolutely,
to go anywhere, because kids can pick up on these things, and it could be an interest to them later on in life.
That whole thing about memory, I mean, memory is such a tricky thing to define. So, it can be triggered by so many things, can't it? It can be a smell, a taste, a photograph. With us, it's often a shared story around the dinner table, which was how I got the idea for the book. So during the first lockdown, Freddie was being homeschooled, Ben had his A-levels cancelled, and Josh was home from uni. And it was just the 5 of us here. And we talked about travelling a lot. And I dug my journals. I've always kept journals, very detailed journals from when I first started travelling. And I dug them out. And I was really struck by how many life lessons they'd learnt. And, the idea for the book, it was jumping out at me. The more I read, I thought, gosh, this is how have I not seen this before?
Mm-hmm.
They've had so many life lessons. And so I think whether you remember something yourself or not, doesn't really matter.
The book has made a massive impact already, and it was voted by National Geographic as one of the best books of 2022. So it has made a massive impact. And you've already mentioned that people are messaging you, families are messaging you to say, I didn't realize you could do this. So I'd ask you this question then. Do you feel as though you've got the impact that you were expecting to receive, or what is your expectation now that it's out there?
I didn't know I would particularly have an impact. I didn't set out to make I don't, I wrote a book about my family, and do you know what I thought? I thought, if no one buys this, which of course, I'm very pleased people have been,
Mm-hmm.
but if no one buys this, I've got this amazing record for my children to pass to their children, whose children will hopefully pass to their children. And that's something quite fantastic. And, I was surprised how quickly it sold to a publisher. And, you feel a bit of pressure, of course, because you want the book to do well. You don't want to let the publisher down, so there is a little bit of stress around that. But actually, me making an impact, I wasn't anticipating hearing from people. The thing I worried about the most was that people would judge me as a mother, and perhaps judge me because, I have been very honest about who we are as a family, and I thought perhaps there might be some things that people might disapprove of. But I haven't had any of that at all.
Why did you feel as though that was going to disapprove of by parents? Is it because it's not? Do you feel as though they think it's not the norm?
We're not very conservative, I'd say, as a family. We're parents who swear occasionally, and I do get things wrong. I make bad decisions occasionally that the boys will pick me up on. I'm very honest about all this in the book. I reflect in the book on, things I've done and things I've said, and, whether I've got it right or not. And, particularly in the later chapters where the boys are challenging me more, of course, and they're becoming their own people. But, what I hope I'm showing is, it's showing the boys growing up, really, and how we're evolving as a family as well. So I've been really touched. I had an email last week from a lady who had been given the book by a friend, and she's recovering. She's having chemotherapy for breast cancer, and she was in a very low place, and her friend had read the book, and she said it had given her a lot of laughs, and had bought it for her. And she said that she'd read the first chapter and just thought, oh, this is just all too much. This is a family, these amazing times, and I can't do that at the moment. And put it aside for a week. And then the following week had gone back to it. And she said she couldn't put it down then the second time she picked it up. And she said she laughed so much and related to me so much, and, thanked me for raising her spirits. And actually, do you know what? I realised, getting that email, that's what it's about.
I can see why it resonates with people. And I will say one thing, that there's no one way of parenting. And you're feeling that sort of maybe insecurity on maybe people will judge me on what I've done. I don't think you should worry about that.
Imagine writing a book about your family, and then sending off the final edit, and it's gone, and the publishers have said, right, okay, you sure you're happy with it all? And you say yes. And then you think, oh my God, what have I done? There was a bit of that. But the boys read it before. So the boys okayed it all before it went off for the final. Ben was my chief reader. So he's studying English. He said to me, he read it first, and he said to me, there's nothing in here, Mum, that we would be embarrassed by. I mean, I was really careful about that. I didn't want them to read it and think, oh gosh, why on earth has she written that? They're really proud of the book and really proud of me and journey as an author, because that's so different to being a journalist. That's been lovely. They've been really supportive. Yeah, they've been great.
What was a challenging aspect of writing this book then? Would it be the fact that you were concerned about what your kids thought or what others thought? What would you say was a challenging aspect of writing the book?
Well, I'm going to say actually that writing the book was a complete joy, really, because we were still in lockdown, and of course the book had been, when it's non-fiction, you write a non-fiction book proposal, so you've written a few sample chapters and a chapter breakdown, and then the publishers buy that. So I knew the book had sold, and it just flowed so well. I loved having the opportunity to reflect on all these wonderful journeys at a time when I couldn't travel anywhere, and where, life on the planet looked pretty bleak, was, just wonderful for me. I did have challenges during lockdown. My mother was in a care home, and, there were other challenges. But for me to have this project ongoing really helped me through. So yes, the challenges probably came afterwards when I'd written it, and then I had a little panic and thought, do I want everybody to know about us as a family? And of course, I've had nothing but positive. I haven't had anything negative or judgmental, and that's probably been lovely. That's been fantastic. My second book, however, has been more challenging.
So you've got another book coming out, and you're writing this currently. So tell us a little bit about what that's going to be about. Is it going to be about your family travel, or is it going to be something completely different?
No, it's not completely different. It's another travel memoir, and it focuses a little bit more, well, a lot more on motherhood. So it's my journey. It looks at my journey through motherhood, and what I've learned from traveling and other mothers and other cultures while I've been traveling, which I've experimented on my kids at times, having picked up different things in different countries. But it also, there's quite a theme of mental health in there as well. I had terrible postnatal depression after Freddie was born, which came as quite a surprise. I hadn't had postnatal depression before with the other two. How can I write a book about motherhood and not talk about the bleak times? Not talk about the really difficult times? And of course you can't. You can't do that. That's not an honest book. And which also then got me thinking that perhaps I needed to share something of my own childhood. So I grew up with a mother who suffered clinical depression, her whole life, and was in and out of hospital with that. And, again, it felt like something very important to share. Now, my mum is 90, and I went to see her. She's fully with it. She understands everything I was explaining what I wanted to do, and she understood everything that I was talking about. And I asked for her permission to write about her own journey, and she said, "Absolutely, Kate. It's so important. Very important for all the young people." And I think what she was thinking about is her own grandchildren. Her own 3 grandsons when she said that. And it was wonderful, to get her permission, and to not only get her permission, but to get such an enthusiastic response. And I've read to her the bits that I've written, that are to do with her, and she's very, very happy with it, and feels that it's important to talk about it, because nobody did back then.
She's 90 now. If you've had clinical depression at a young, time of, I remember, I won't mention who it is, it's someone close to me, having depression 30 odd years ago, and people wouldn't really take it seriously at the time.
Yeah.
But now mental health is widely spoken of, which is great.
Yeah, it is.
30 years ago, it wasn't the case. No. People would tell you to toughen up.
We're talking 40 years ago, we're talking, and before that, when she was, much younger. And I think that, so because my book is about motherhood, I felt that I needed to be honest again. I mean, my first book is honest, but, there are some themes in my first book that are a little, it's not all light and breezy. I do talk about, losing a loved one, and how we dealt with that in the Mexico chapter. So consequently, it was a bit harder to write. I had to dig deep. It's turned out, I think, to be, I hope, I'm very proud of it now. I'm really excited about it. And I had to be a little bit braver with it. But again, having messages from women who've read my first book has given me courage. And I think now the second one will be relatable again, I hope.
When do you feel as though that will be coming out?
That will probably not be out until 2024.
For you to have this much success, does it feel overwhelming?
Well, I never think of myself as particularly successful.
Well, you are.
Well, okay. I'll, if I hear it enough, maybe I'll start believing it. I think I'm very lucky to have had these opportunities, and I do work hard. It's the only overwhelming thing I think for me has been and good overwhelming, is seeing the book in bookshops at times, and at times the pressure and wanting the book to sell well has felt a little overwhelming. That pressure, suddenly the kind of commercial side of it can feel a little overwhelming. No, on the most part it's been good. I'd say the most part it's good, but I do feel it would be quite nice to have just a little quiet time now to do some travel writing, go back to journalism.
If the book continues to do well and your next book continues to do well, perhaps maybe a film out of it, who knows? Anything's possible.
I wouldn't even go there, really. I don't think about that. I think let's just take every step as it comes, because that's enough for me. I can't think too far in the future. I mean, what I've discovered, really, if I'm really, really honest, it's the writing I love. It's wonderful to see the book out there and everything. But I'm my happiest when I'm writing.
Well, Kate, I want to congratulate you for, as I said, an amazing book that you've got. It's such a. If people haven't read it yet, you can buy it in all good bookshops. You can also buy it on Amazon as well. Kate, before I let you go, just tell everyone how they can actually follow you.
So I'm on Instagram at wickers.kate and Twitter at Kate Wickers. Quite easy.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
I've really enjoyed it, Sheb.
No problem. So I'll bring you back on to discuss your next book when it comes out.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button to never miss an episode. And follow me on all of my social media platforms. That's it for Taking One with Shebs. Hope to see you all soon. Until next time, bye for now.